Deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Oh, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, right now it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking Time for Hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to Time for Hemp all around the world on Tumblr, SoundCloud, iTunes, and, of course, iHeartRadio. We are the only 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week, all cannabis, all broadcasting network on iHeartRadio. In fact, we are currently the only 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week, all cannabis broadcast anywhere. And we are the only popsicle stand in the desert quite like us. With that said, you might want to make it a point to share us with your friends. Check out all of our hosts on the network. If you like this show, you're bound to like so many others. Mark Emery is bringing his crew to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. They've started broadcasting this week. Skunk Magazine's doing a show now once a week on the Broadcasting Network. And in about a week, if you make it a point to go to the timeforhemp.com website, you'll find us growing marijuana on the site. That's right. With Indigro's help, we are going to be putting cameras on a large indoor grow, and you and all your friends can log in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and watch a live feed of a big, beautiful garden growing from seed to harvest here at Time for Hemp. With that said, I'm going to pass this joint conversation over to my joint host. It is Wednesday, and on Wednesday, I have Judge Lenny Frieling as my joint host, and we like to explore the world of prohibition together here on Time for Hemp. Your Honor?
Casper, a pleasure as always. The live shot of the large grow sounds like a wonderful screensaver. Just look at your screen and smile.
There you go.
And 24/7, another example of people smoking pot, being lazy, accomplishing nothing other than the 24/7.
That's right. And again, it's another unique aspect to our amazing website, timeforhemp.com.
Today, as a guest, we're honored, we are privileged, and we are lucky to have Brian Vicente. Brian Vicente, Vicente. Brian is a hero. Brian is, without a doubt, one of, if not the key people in Colorado and therefore worldwide, marijuana progress, legalization, law. Brian is the number one man at what I believe to be the leading marijuana law firm in the world. Without question in Colorado, without question in the United States, I think in the world. This is the man. This show is going to be smoking. We're honored to have him. Brian, my friend, my patriot, thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks so much, Lenny. It's really a pleasure to be on with you guys. And, it's obviously been an incredible reforms going on across the globe right now. So I'm really happy to talk to you guys about all the progress that's happened and where the future's going and all that good stuff. So great to be here.
Brian, in the position that you're in, we know that you are working, of course, with the variety of groups working with a common goal, and you're more closely tied with some than with others, more directly tied. MPP, Marijuana Policy Project, am I correct?
Well, yeah, certainly MPP has been a close ally of mine for over a decade. They actually provided some of the startup funding to help me form Sensible Colorado, which was a nonprofit that contributed to many of the marijuana reforms we saw in Colorado. And then we now assist them financially and assist them with drafting, new laws around the country. And so it's a good kind of symbiotic relationship there. And, we're happy to be able to work with such an effective group.
One of our messaging guys, one of the guys leading the charge, Mason Tvert, Tvert. And I like spelling these things so that people can follow up, can find them. Mason is somebody that you also work with closely, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked closely with Mason for over a decade. He actually is right downstairs from me right now. We've been in the same office for the last, about the last 10 years, officing together. And I really feel privileged and honored to work with him every day. He's just an absolute force. I call him the James Brown of marijuana reform because he's the hardest working man alive.
I have a confession to make. I ran into Mason one day, and we've known each other for many years, and Mason was talking about his pitch, his great idea, how he was going to legalize, move it forward, and his approach was safer. Marijuana is safer than alcohol. On the one hand, as we know, it was a key piece. It worked. It was a key piece of success from everything I can see. I confess that when he first told me that, my reaction was along the lines of, 1, you're out of your mind. 2, there's no way that'll work. That's crazy. What are you doing? I am so happy to say that I'm wrong. I've said it to Mason to his face. I will say it on the air. He was right. It was key. It worked. The lesson to me is be a little more open-minded to messaging and realize that not everyone reacts to things just the way that I do. Mm-hmm. Brian, you've been at the forefront of this in Colorado for a decade, for more. What brought you to the entry point?
Sure. So yeah, I've been doing this full time for over a decade, and I really had always been one of those people that felt sort of in my heart that the war on drugs was a failure, and growing up, the more you learned about it, the more you thought, wow, this is a failed policy, and we're treating all these marijuana consumers, like myself and my friends or what have you, growing up like criminals, and that just struck me as wrong-headed. When I was in law school, I had at the University of Denver, I had the opportunity to really foster my interest in this area. I worked for a professor that was writing law review articles about the ballot initiative process and marijuana initiative specifically. And I also worked for federal judge John Kane, who's a federal judge here in Denver. And is essentially a libertarian, and he's been very outspoken against the war on drugs because he was forced through war on drugs laws to sentence people to 30, 40, 50 years in prison as a federal judge because they it was a third strike you're out type law, etc. So people with small amounts of drugs were going to jail forever, and so he as a federal judge spoke out against that, which is very rare for federal judges to take sort of political stances like that. And so I clerked for him, and it crystallized in my mind. And here I was working with these professors, with this federal judge. It's tough to think of a more prestigious position than a federal judge, who really were speaking their mind on the war on drugs and marijuana prohibition. And as such, I kind of got in contact with the Marijuana Policy Project and found that despite what my career guidance officers were saying, there could be a future in working to reform marijuana laws, representing medical marijuana patients, etc. And what a lot of people viewed as career suicide has actually worked out really well for me. And starting in 2004, I worked for a nonprofit, changing drug laws, changing marijuana laws specifically, representing medical marijuana patients, and really working to change Colorado's laws at the local level around marijuana, and then ultimately at the state level. And of course, I was involved every step of the way as we then pushed things through with Amendment 64 in 2012, which of course Lenny and I assume pretty much everyone listening to this knows that made Colorado the first place in the world to legalize marijuana. So really proud to have played a part in all that and where our state's heading.
And I think it's fair to say that played apart really is a rather modest description of that's like saying I played a part in a Shakespeare play. Some character named Hamlet. Yeah, I played a part. I had a role. Oh, I got a credit. Oh. Brian, you know, and it's honest and it's fair to say you've been at the front of this. You've been ahead of the front. What I'm thinking is when you were first looking at, is this suicide or is this a good idea? When somebody jumps off a 10-story building, one of two things are going to happen. They're either going to meet the sidewalk abruptly and not happily, or between 10 and 1, they're going to learn to fly. You're one of the people that learned to fly.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it certainly was a leap of faith, if you will. Obviously, there's many people historically that have felt strongly that marijuana prohibition was a failure, dating back to Keith Straub and Jack Herer, and of course Lenny's been doing this for decades. I mean, people have been fighting this fight, and for me, it was important to connect with those folks to learn the lessons there, but also to kind of forge ahead and with Mason and Safer and different sort of things we thought made sense, to kind of push forward in our own way. And really, capitalize from lessons learned, but also kind of forge ahead. And, we really were facing down about 90 years of marijuana prohibition. So it was a daunting task to think about, like, let's try to make marijuana legal. But, now that it's here, I think we've sort of opened people's eyes to that. And we see other states, of course, adopting laws like Colorado and other countries looking at this as well.
I hear in the background, we hear a siren, and I'm sitting here thinking, that's a siren that is going to help somebody, not a siren signaling a drug raid in Denver.
Yeah.
First responders responding to things that we want them to respond to. Yeah. Let me also point out things that you and I as lawyers take for granted, but I think civilians don't know. First, clerking for a federal judge. Those are the kind of jobs that, coming out of law school, everyone would love to do. No one gets to do it. The competition for the positions, I think, is perhaps tougher than trying to seek maybe any other law job. These are new lawyers. These are guys out of law school clerking for a federal judge. That is a big deal. We're not talking a clerk type person. We're talking about the person who, for example, Judge Kane might say, here's where I'm leaning, here's what I'm thinking. Why don't you draft an opinion for me? Mm-hmm. These are the guys that do the work, do the heavy lifting. The other thing quite unusual that I want to point out is this. In general, at the state level, judges do not and are not supposed to speak out off the bench on political issues, on issues. They're not supposed to do that. The federal system is the opposite. My understanding, my belief is that federal judges are encouraged to publicly say, here's what I think. Judge John Kane is one of our heroes, a federal judge who came out publicly, repeatedly, and said, this should be legal. This war on drugs has failed. It's a bad policy. And I'm paraphrasing. It's wrong. We need to do away with it. We hold him in the highest esteem. And
yeah. No, absolutely. And I would say too, Lenny, it's funny how I actually met Judge Kane and thank you for laying out, it is certainly difficult to get clerkship positions, but I've always been a little bit of a hustler. I'm certainly not a genius by any stretch, but I basically started reading some of his work on the drug war. He published in the Denver Post, and he wrote, forewords to books. And it was stunning how eloquent and beautiful his writing was on the travesties of the drug war. And so then he occasionally speaks publicly in Denver, where I was going to law school, and I would just go, and I'd go to hear him speak, and eventually it was like the third time I had gone to hear him speak in the span of a couple of months, and I was the only man there besides him at a women's Rotary Club meeting. And he was the speaker, and he just came up to me afterwards and said, what are you doing here? Who are you? And we kind of hit it off there. And I said, I'm passionate about the work that you do. I want to say thank you for speaking out. It means so much to so many people who are locked away in jail cells or being profiled because of the color of their skin or what have you, to have someone prestigious speak out on their behalf. And we sort of just kept in touch from there. And when I applied to be his clerk, I like to think that sort of put me on the fast track to get that position.
Fast track is fine. Fast track is a wonderful thing. Hitting it off is a wonderful thing. You and I both know that where the rubber meets the road, the rest of it, although fun and interesting, just doesn't cut it. You have to have what you brought to the table, the talent, the skill, the brains, to make it happen. He was not going to take you on as a clerk because he liked you, because he agreed with you. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. These judges want to hire clerks that are smarter than they are. Otherwise, why bother? I know in my hiring and who I work with, I want to work with people smarter than I am. I don't have an ego need, and I know you well enough to know this is not about your ego. This is not about you impressing your staff. This is about how do we get this done? How do we get it done effectively? And oh, by the way, it worked. It worked. Nicely done. Let me ask you this, and I've always been curious about this, and it can be a touchy subject. I know in California, for example, with their various laws, if you ask I could name 5 top-notch California marijuana lawyers who would all say, I drafted the law. They may have helped. They may have drafted it. I don't know the reality, but I do know that in Colorado, you are the man to whom I can ask the question, get a straightforward, honest answer, and here's the question. What role did you play in the drafting of the legalization of marijuana so that a civilian over 21, a tourist, can go into the store after showing proof of age and buy marijuana?
Yeah, Amendment 64 is an absolute landmark document, and my role was pretty prominent. I led the drafting, and let me explain what that means, because I'm not saying I'm the sole author, but I sort of organized and led the drafting process, and it was a unique process, which is actually pretty dissimilar, pretty different from how marijuana laws have been written in the past. For instance, in Washington, who that state legalized marijuana the same night as Colorado. They had a very closed door process. It was 1 or 2 people writing the law. In Colorado, we decided to have this very open process. And so it was about 6 months where I would get together with, a core group of people, Steve Fox from Marijuana Policy Project, who now works for my law firm, Tamar Todd from the Drug Policy Alliance, and a handful of other individuals, and really work on a draft. Now, we fortunately had Colorado had licensed medical marijuana stores and grows, so we had some sort of framework to work off of. And then what we did is we refined that, and then we really shared it with as many smart, capable, trustworthy individuals as we could to try to get their input. So that that includes lawyers inside and outside of Colorado. That includes business owners, marijuana business owners. That includes civil rights advocates, ACLU, etc., and really tried to get as much feedback as possible into those initial drafts, which we would then incorporate, things that made sense or what have you. And I think that sort of open-ended process, which took 6 months, it really accomplished two important goals. One, it allowed us to land with a law that I think, while not perfect, I think Amendment 64 is very, very strong. I do, and that's, I had some good ideas, Steve had some good ideas, but there are many good ideas that people brought to the table, and we were able to incorporate those. The second piece is by, really reaching out to, dozens of individuals to get their input. We also got their buy-in to the law, and this had never been done before. We needed everyone to support this and to feel a degree of ownership. So to make sure that NORML and the ACLU and the NAACP and the Drug Policy Alliance and rich people with money and business owners and medical marijuana business owners, all had some degree of buy-in to this. They had been consulted, and their thoughts, whether incorporated or not, were taken into account, and they were treated with respect. That made a big difference in terms of us, coalition building and fundraising for the subsequent year that we ran this campaign.
My understanding, and thank you, that was the most direct, open, intelligent answer to that question I could have imagined. Not only is it obviously the truth, it has that ring of truth, it also, more importantly, sets out a model for other states to build from. You and I know we're not perfect here. Damn good. And you and I also know that we want other states to build on it. Take what works, build on it, make it better. But boy, the team that you worked with, working with the stakeholders, that gave such a leap. This is the leap hour, so we like the word leap. It gave such a head start that when we run into issues like, should you be able to do butane extractions in your kitchen, there's fine-tuning. Colorado is the leading home rule state. Cities in Colorado, if they choose, have more power than cities in any state in the United States. That's all working for us. I've said many, many times, the United States has been referred to historically as the Great Experiment. And what we mean by that is one state, say Colorado, gives it their best shot with the best minds, with the best motivation. We do what we can. Then 49 other states, and, oh, by the way, the rest of the planet, gets to look at it and form their own opinions, build on it, criticize it, make it better. We want that. And happily, and thank you, you have given us, with the team, you've given us, yes, please.
One thing that I'm always happy to do is take a commercial break and pay our bills. That's what keeps us up and going. And I want to remind people that, like a good joint, we are best when shared with friends. We will be right back after this break and a great song about how fantastic marijuana is. You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
THCF Medical Clinics are the premier physicians clinic in the United States. THCF has offices all across the United States from Hawaii to Michigan. THCF Medical Clinics has helped approximately 150,000 patients obtain their medical marijuana permits to legally possess, grow, and use medical marijuana. If you have chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, or any other neurological degenerative disease, or if you have any gastrointestinal disorders such as GERD, irritable bowel febrile syndrome, or if you have AIDS, cancer, spastic disorders, seizure disorders, or glaucoma, call us at 1-800-723-0188 or visit us online at hemp.org. Again, the number is 1-800-723-0188 and the site is hemp.org.
Get your smoke on, everybody gather round. My connection came to town. He's got chronic, don't you know? He came straight from Mexico. Buy an eighth or buy an ounce, but here comes the 5-0, so you better bounce. Get your smoke on, get your smoke on. Light up a joint and make it fatty. Get your smoke on. Don't tell my mom, I won't tell your daddy. Get your smoke on. Call your dealer, call him fast. Get your smoke on. This half ounce ain't gonna last. Get your smoke on. So smoke a blunt or smoke a J. Just pack up a bong, low down, I'll be okay. Get your smoke on. Get your smoke on. Legal stuff from Uncle Sam. Get your smoke on. Contraband from Amsterdam. Get your smoke on. Northern Lights and chocolate time. Get your smoke on. So many ways to get you high. Get your smoke on. Oh, I've been feeling all day long, so pack up some chronic and a 4-foot bong. Buy an eighth or buy an ounce, but here comes the 5-0, so you better bounce. Smoke a blunt or smoke a J. Just pack me a bong, low down, I'll be okay. Get your smoke on. 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 Get your smoke on.
Yeah, baby, get your smoke on. I love that song. We use that as a bumper sometimes on the program. Once in a while, I'll play it in its entirety. It's kind of like it's so cheesy, it's good. That's the kind of tunes I like. Cheesy tunes that are so cheesy that they're good. And speaking of cheesy, I know some cheesy people. We're on break. We were talking about this cheesy clown named Chris Christie. I love Chris Christie because he is like fodder for comedy. Here is a man who stood up in front of God and everybody, weighing almost 400 pounds, saying that one of the major problems with smoking marijuana is it causes you to lose your willpower.
Nice.
Here at Time for Hemp, I pass that to you, Your Honor.
I think all of us have met the occasional person who gets up in the morning, smokes a significant amount of really wonderful weed, puts their feet up, and watches Captain Kangaroo and smokes cigarettes. I think that what people are now seeing and realizing more and more is that, oh, by the way, the people you are not noticing, the bulk of the cannabis users, cannabis enjoyers, are people that may well get up and have a toke with their coffee. Then they go out and kick ass in their professions. They're at the highest, so to speak, levels in their professions. And then when they start fading at the end of the day, what do? Quit, call it a day? No. Many of us take another hit and go back and hit it for another few hours. They're just not as noticeable. And now that we're legalized in Colorado, now that people in high-profile positions can, if they choose, come out and say, oh, yes, by the way, I happen to like smoking marijuana. And I'm thinking in particular of our very dear friend, Mr. Chiari, Chris Chiari, who ran for Denver City Council as an open pot smoker. No secret, complete honesty. Here's what I do. Here's what I stand for. By the way, I'm a hell of a politician, and I believe in things like intelligent building, a good use of resources, better public transportation. And, oh, by the way, I smoke pot, too. We're seeing that more and more. I have observed in the past that it is at some level humorous that it became okay to be gay before it became okay to say I smoke pot. That demonstrates to me just how strong the devil's lettuce advocacy position of the early 1900s, of William Randolph Hearst and Anslinger, just how powerful a dishonest, blatantly emotional appeal, which, by the way, worked for a gentleman named Adolf Hitler also. And it's still working. And we are educating ourselves, educating our friends, so that we have things like a pot tax amnesty day because we're raising enough money to have that. Let me ask you this, Brian. You and I both make it a point to stay as much on top of and as much ahead of the news as we can, so that when people ask us, what about this study? What about it causes schizophrenia and the trains don't run? And oh, by the way, I read yesterday the sky is falling in Colorado. And now we have something just in the last 24 to 48 hours, I believe, once again talking about the sky is falling. Would you speak to that, please? You know what I'm referring to, right?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, as we all know, there's been decades and decades and decades of, reefer madness propaganda put out by the government agents, and law enforcement agencies, which incidentally is why LEAP and the brave law enforcement agents, ex-law enforcement agents there are so important. That voice is so important to counteract that. But those reefer madness propaganda has not unfortunately come to an end, even though Colorado and 3 other states have legalized marijuana. We have 23 states with medical marijuana. Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, legalized marijuana. We'll probably see another 5 states legalized in 2016. I'm happy to talk about that later if folks want to. But, just yesterday, we had another report from a group called Rocky Mountain Haida. The author of that is this self-admitted alcohol prohibitionist, not just marijuana, also believes in alcohol prohibition, named Tom Gorman. And he's a former former narcotics officer with no background in research, science, methodology, etc. But he continues to put out these reports under this, advocacy group called Rocky Mountain Haida, which really, and incidentally, Tom Gorman was the lead spokesperson against Amendment 64, so it's not like he doesn't have a clear, open agenda, but in no way is his, are these reports based in fact or science. But nevertheless, he puts them out and a fair amount of newspapers and so forth pick up on them. And it's important that folks listening to this podcast, folks that perhaps work in marijuana reform, or at least read the newspaper and would have a discussion with their parents who read this latest ridiculous report from Tom Gorman, can think about these things in a thoughtful way. And the truth is, really legalization of marijuana in Colorado is actually going very smoothly. And many of the things claimed in these reports, it's really the same nonsense that the federal government and other agencies have been spewing for years, that marijuana destroys kids' brains, and if you legalize marijuana, everyone's going to drive while high. And fortunately, there's just hard data, hard government studies that show that in Colorado, none of that's true. Now, to be fair, we've only had legal marijuana for just a little over 2 years, especially from the storefront model here in Colorado. So we don't have a ton of data, but what is out there really shows that there's some great trends going on. We've actually seen teen use of marijuana drop in Colorado since we've legalized marijuana. We've seen road fatalities go down across the board. In Colorado. Does that mean it's due to marijuana? I don't know. There's compelling arguments there. There's some data out there that shows that states that have medical marijuana laws actually have lower road fatalities than states without medical marijuana laws. So maybe there is a link there. But the important thing is, there were allegations made that if Colorado were to legalize marijuana, suddenly our roads would be covered in blood from high drivers. And in fact, road fatalities have just gone down across the board. You can't argue with that. And the final piece I would throw out is there's one of their claims made by Rocky Mountain Haida and other prohibitionists is that marijuana is pouring out of Colorado into surrounding states, Nebraska and so forth. And if you think about those claims, it's sort of ridiculous on its face. I mean, clearly people have been transporting marijuana around our country for probably 100 years, so it's not like this is suddenly a new trend. But at the end of the day, I mean, really any of the data out there shows from the Postal Service or whatnot, like they're not, in fact, seizing statistically significant more higher amounts of marijuana. We're not seeing necessarily more arrests go on. It does appear there's a lot more profiling of Colorado people with Colorado license plates. So that's worth noting. But at the end of the day, despite what these prohibitionists are putting out, really, when you look at the facts, and it really appears that things are going quite well in terms of moving into this new level of regulation.
I don't want to advocate breaking the law. Ethically, I'm not permitted to. Practically, it's dumb. I don't want to advocate breaking the law. But if we are given a choice, as Americans, if we are given a choice of illegal marijuana brought up from south of the Texas border, whether it's grown in Mexico, further south, wherever, if the choice is buy Mexican underground pot in a state where it is flat out illegal, or buy American, which illegal pot does it make more sense to buy? Do we want to be funding the destruction of the country of Mexico? Do we want to be funding the destruction of Central America? I'd like to believe not. We're Americans. If we want to make it, we can make it. If we want to grow it, we can grow it. Why should we be shipping jobs out of the country? That's just fundamental, dare I use the word, patriotism. Personally, I would rather pay a higher price, go to the store, buy legal marijuana, than I would buy it underground. Let's say I could buy it for half the price, and we all know that is not true. It is just not what's happening. What I am seeing is people buying pot at the store. The underground, I don't even know people anymore. Not that I ever did, but I don't even know people anymore who are selling underground pot in Colorado. Smokers, not new people, Basically, the same people that were buying underground before are now going to the store and buying it legally.
And to
We're
that
not-
point,
Yes,
to that
please.
point, Lenny, there's a fascinating data point that came out yesterday that Colorado's taxes produced from marijuana sales have now exceeded, in the last fiscal year, exceeded the taxes produced by alcohol sales in Colorado. So, and it's roughly 70 million of tax revenue have come through marijuana sales in the last fiscal year, and about 42 million of alcohol sales tax revenue has come through, which is really phenomenal if you think about it. I mean, the alcohol industry has been around for, I guess, since the 1930s, and is only producing $40 million in a place that really celebrates alcohol in the way that Colorado does. Whereas the marijuana industry has been around for 2 years and is almost producing double the amount of tax revenue for our state. It's simply phenomenal, and it speaks to the fact that people are going into these stores. They're less and less going to the black market, going to dark alleys, going to their college dorm or whatever to buy marijuana. They're going to these stores. They're patronizing those legal businesses, and to the tune of this being a $1 billion industry in Colorado. So it's really phenomenal, the growth that's happened really just in the last 2 years.
I am never speechless. I'm a lawyer. I'm a former judge. Speechless doesn't happen. But when I hear somebody that I know and trust say, we are taking in more taxes on marijuana than on alcohol, and we all know alcohol is highly taxed, I am bordering on speechless.
Well,
That's
good.
nice.
While you're speechless, that'll give us just about 2 minutes to take a commercial break and pay our bills here at Time for Hemp.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. The only broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs on iHeartRadio. Please share us with your friends.
Serious Seeds is your source for quality cannabis and sativa seeds. Serious Seeds are the creators of legendary strains like AK-47, Bubblegum, Chronic, Cali Mist, and White Russian. The AK-47 is probably the most awarded strain on the planet. The high THC content of AK-47 makes it the perfect medical strain for patients seeking quick pain relief. Cali Mist is an almost pure sativa. Female medical cannabis patients have reported that this strain helps relieve menstrual cramps. Serious Seeds just acquired another Dutch high-quality seed bank, Magus Genetics. From now on, Serious Seeds can offer you even more award-winning strains. The fine folks at Serious Seeds strive to breed the best cannabis genetics that they can find, so patients can rely on the effectiveness of their medicine. Go to SeriousSeeds.com to grow your medicine. That site again is SeriousSeeds.com.
Puff, puff, give, puff, puff, give. Share and live. Puff, puff, give, puff, puff, give, puff, puff, give. Share and live. Puff, puff, give. It grows from the earth can't hurt. Stay alert with consciousness. No
Yeah, it does grow from the earth, so I don't understand what the big brouhaha is. I mean, it's not... I mean, we got this law against the plant. Like, this plant's going to chase you down the street, creep into your bedroom at night, and strangle you. And it's not like it's a plant like poison ivy or poison oak or a plant that if you do actually eat it, you might actually die. No. This is a plant that if you eat it, gosh, you get more healthy. That if you smoke it, gosh, you get more healthy. And so I have no clue as to what people are jumping up and down screaming, oh, this is a bad thing to do. But, I don't know. That's why we're fighting this prohibition here at Time for Hemp. That's my rant. I pass this back to my joint host and our joint guest here at Time for Hemp.
Thanks, Casper. Think about how powerful the emotional impact going back to 1907, 1937. Think about how powerful the emotional impact was. William Randolph Hearst, as part of that process, convinced the country to ban the making of rope, R-O-P-E. Now, in order to win World War II, one of the things we had to do was equip ships. And we had a bit of a problem because lines, and there's only one rope on a ship, and that's the one attached to the bell. Everything else is a line. We had battleships ready to drop in the water, and we couldn't outfit them. We've heard the phrase Manila hemp. We take it for granted too easily. Let's remind ourselves, Manila, Philippines, where were the battles coming on? We had no rope. The government, and I have to encourage you because it's astonishing, go to YouTube, watch the 15-minute piece put out by the United States government called Hemp for Victory, Growing Hemp for Victory, teaching farmers how critical it was, how easy it was, how important it was. We won the war. I could argue, and I'm pushing it, I could argue that marijuana won the war. We would have lost without it. I won't push it quite that far. But the point is that the emotional impact was so intense that we banned making rope and convinced people that was a good thing. Brian, let me throw a name out at you. Tony Ryan. Familiar name?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Decorated Denver police officer.
And Tony, a LEAP speaker, has come out for many, many, many years against prohibition, a failed policy. Do you see, he had some TV commercials that ran shortly before the election. Do you see that as being as significant a piece of the victory as I do?
Well, I certainly think that was very impactful. Tony Ryan is not only was he a decorated Denver police officer for several decades, he also was really a hero in that he interrupted robberies and just all sorts of interesting things throughout his police career. So he's a very credible voice, and he had been involved in Colorado's reform efforts around marijuana for several years. But then he really got heavily involved when we shot some commercials of him sort of talking about how from a police officer perspective they prefer to deal with other things. People smoking marijuana are not the problem, and let's stop forcing them to arrest those individuals, and let's use our law enforcement resources more wisely. And those were very powerful commercials, and we fortunately had the cash to put those on TV and sort of blanket his face and this message out there. And I think that really reached a lot of people and helped us surge in the polls and get to 55% of the states. We actually won by more than Obama. We won by more than our governor. It was a pretty significant number of people, and I think LEAP and Tony Ryan really played a big part in that.
I couldn't agree more. Tony had three things going for him. One, his experience, his reputation. Two, his heartfelt belief. And three, if you see the man and listen to the man for 15 seconds, you would bet your life that the man is not capable of lying. It just couldn't happen. You didn't need to know him. You needed to see him for 30 seconds. And you knew if he said it, he believed it. Chris Christie. regardless of your politics, and I don't want to take sides because, as I think we can all agree, legalization of marijuana is not a Democratic issue. If anything, it is a critically Republican issue. Self-determination, states' rights, fiscal responsibility, all of the underpinnings of the true, what I would call the Lincoln Republicans, are strongly supporting legalization. Chris Christie. I see Chris Christie as my new favorite Democrat of all time, rivaled only by Sarah Palin, my single most favorite Democrat of all time. And if one were a Democrat, nothing better could happen than have Chris Christie to run against. That would be a wonderful thing. Let me ask you this. Let's look ahead. When I look ahead, two issues jump out at me. One is I drive to Durango. I want to smoke, medically, pleasure, whatever. I go to Durango. How do I smoke legally? We haven't quite solved that yet. We have people coming in as tourists. We legally sell and they legally buy sufficient small quantities of pot to get as stoned as they want to get and then to not drive. We need to move ahead so that they have legal, safe places to smoke. I've stood at check-in counters at hotels at the desk and have people walk up and say, I just bought this. Where can I smoke this? And the desk clerk's response is, I don't know. So we're working on that. Banking. We need to get out of the cash business for all the obvious reasons. Brian, where do you see us going? What do you see in the future?
Sure. So I think, I think we basically have the tipping point that's been reached where, marijuana legalization will spread from state to state to state and ultimately around the world. Of course, it's important that we stay vigilant and act responsibly under these new laws and continue to contribute to the tax base and so forth. But I think really marijuana legalization has proven itself as a sound policy. And as such, I believe next year, November of 2016, not only will we be electing a new president, which hopefully will not be Chris Christie, but I believe also probably 5 states will legalize marijuana that night, right? That same election night that we get a new president. And I think that's worth kind of focusing on because, I'll sort of name off what I believe those states will be. Our office is actually involved in helping to craft the language in most of those states to try to make it similar to Colorado and workable for businesses and for communities. But I also think if there's any listeners out there and you're in those states or you have friends in those states or what have you want to move to those states, this is the time to really get involved. And those will be sophisticated, well-funded campaigns, but they really can't win without people, working on their behalf, volunteering, educating other individuals, and of course getting out and voting. So, I believe in November of 2016 we'll see California, Nevada, Arizona, Maine, and Massachusetts all legalize marijuana in one fell swoop. And again, that's not going to happen without a lot of hard work and money, but I believe those are strong ballot measures and stand a strong chance of winning. Now, if all those win, I think that, again, is so much wind in the sails of this movement that it'd be tough for the prohibitionists to turn back the clock, particularly with California coming on board and legalizing. There's so many U.S. congressmen from California that will then be going to D.C. I think that will create the momentum for a change at the federal level, either a rescheduling or descheduling of marijuana in 2017. So maybe I'm a little bit of an optimist on this, but I believe that's the direction that this is headed in. So again, I would encourage people in those states to really get involved now. And typically MPP, the Marijuana Policy Project, is an excellent resource in terms of contacting them and saying, hey, how can I help in my state?
And we're down to the last 2 minutes, so this is a chance to wrap it up and, again, give out shout-outs for any upcoming events, organizations, or URLs you want to spotlight. And we'll start with our joint host and our joint guest. Our joint guest today, give a shout-out.
Well,
Brian
yeah. So sorry, this is Brian here. I just wanted to say thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure to talk about this issue. And if you're interested in learning more about my law firm, you can check that out at themarijuanalawfirm.com. Or in terms of our advocacy activities, they're listed at sensiblecolorado.org. So please hop on there and check it out.
And Your Honor?
Brian, you said the marijuana law. Let's get that perfectly repeated clearly. Your link.
Themarijuanalawfirm.com.
I can say as an aside, as a practicing marijuana lawyer, that is not an overstatement. These guys are the deal. They're the real deal. They are the marijuana law firm. I think that it's fair to say that they are involved in representing businesses and helping people get the right licenses and badges in every aspect of it. These are the guys. Brian mentioned MPP, Marijuana Policy Project. I suspect that he would also agree that Sensible, SSDP, MPA, LEAP, Normal. Personally, I joined all of them. We need to do it. We need to join. They need the money. We need the money. Brian, could the election have been won on Amendment 64 on legalization without literally several $1 million being put into the election?
It would have been very difficult, yeah. I mean, again, we have to block out the noise of this sort of entrenched federal government and law enforcement view that marijuana prohibition will, make your head explode. So we really have to, often have money to educate the public on the facts around this, and that takes people donating.
Well, we also want to remind people that we are a 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week broadcasting network. And if you like this program, we have archives, all of our archives from the last 25 years, as a matter of fact, for Time for Hemp are found at the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network website. And we also have a variety of other hosts like Judge James Gray, Mark Emery. We got Skunk Magazine on board, Chris Conrad. And we got about 15 other hosts that you would enjoy listening to. Every other hour is talk. Every other hour is music. And we like to jazz it up. The one thing that we're all focused on is the need to end prohibition. And like a good joint, we are best when you are sharing us with your friends. With that said, remember, the next time you hear me, you'll know that it's time for hemp.
Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spent. Take another look and spend some time for him. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yes, it's time for him. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20 bales of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.